Hello and welcome to another episode of Building Success, a real estate podcast. My name is Nick, and I will once again be your guide as we talk to some of the best and brightest in the worlds of real estate tech, operations, and financials from across the globe. This podcast would not be possible without listeners like you. So if you like what you hear and you want to hear more of it, please consider subscribing to us on iTunes, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as leaving a rating and review. All of that really helps us see how well we're doing and make it more accessible to everybody who might be searching for this kind of content. So today I spoke with Tiffany Mittal from PayLease, an industry expert in the utilities game in real estate. And today we talked about utility billing specifically, a concept that not a lot of property managers are embracing. They are still rolling with a flat fee as rental income. And we talked to some of the benefits of really establishing a utility billing system, ways to go about starting, looking at regulations, and how to get a program like utility billing off the ground. Pretty interesting episode, and we hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, here is Tiffany Mittal. So thank you, Tiffany, so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Nick, for having me.
And before we get started into our topic, I was hoping you could give me a little bit of a background about yourself and what brought you to PayLease.
Well, I've been in the multifamily industry for about 15 years on both the owner and the vendor side. I've been in submetering and utility billing for just about half of that, and I was actually familiar with PayLease as a payments company, but then I learned about their utility billing platform, so it piqued my interest. And it's actually one of the most innovative in the market, especially the automations that they have for property management. And so learning a little bit more about that, it just made me really want to come and be a part of the team here.
Okay, and let's talk about utility billing. Let's get right into it. I certainly know what it is, and I've rented apartments before, and I've paid utilities. Sometimes those utilities are bundled into my monthly rent. What I didn't know was how complex this topic is, but one thing I learned in looking at PayLease and then preparing for this conversation with you is that a lot of property managers aren't even bothering to bill for utilities separately, and they're just packaging everything together for simplicity's sake. Can you kind of tell me why that's occurring?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a struggle in the industry to initially first start a utility billing program because there's a lot of fear. Nobody wants to be the first one in their neighborhood to do it. They don't know what their residents' reaction is going to be. They don't know what the regulations are or if it's legal. And so they think they have it covered by just charging their rent with the utilities included. But what they don't realize is, let's say they're charging $850 for rent, and their neighbor apartment community is charging $850 for rent plus utilities. You're really leaving money on the table because at that point, you're not really even at market rent. And some people are just confused and not really sure how to get started.
So if I'm the property owner, Tiffany, and I want to make sure to keep my rent at a comfortable rate for me and for my tenants, what are the downsides to having that flat fee?
Well, the problem with having a flat fee is you don't have any incentive for conservation. So if your residents know that no matter what, my water bill is going to be $25, I'm going to use as much water as I want because it doesn't really matter how much I use. I'm going to continue to pay the same. And that doesn't really account for any utility price fluctuations. If your bill goes up or down and you're charging a flat fee, you have a potential for overcharging, which then you hit some regulatory issues with that as well. But mainly, you want your residents to conserve, and if people pay for what they use, you're going to see that conservation as a whole happen at your property.
Which is interesting, and something probably people don't think about is that overusage of the utilities because they know that they're not paying for it. And then what happens probably, I'm assuming, is that the property manager then has to raise that overall rent the following year. And it seems like it's going up at way too high of a level consistent with other properties. And it's because they're doing that flat rate, right?
Exactly. It helps stabilize your cash flow and rent. If you don't have to continue to increase your rents because your utility rates keep going up and your utility costs keep going up, you can actually have a stabilized rental base that's more market driven, and then the utilities are driven just from the actual utilities itself and everyone's usage.
So if someone's interested and they want to start a program for utility billing at their property, where do they begin?
Well, there's two types of utility billing methods, and they have to figure out what's the best for that property. For example, submeters. Submeters are basically a way to install a water meter or an electric meter at each unit, which will charge the residents for their actual meter use. But sometimes you can't install a submeter at the property. Either it's not in the budget or the property's plumbing just doesn't allow it, and it's not feasible to install a bunch of meters and replumb the building. Mm-hmm. So at that point, you go to something called ratio utility billing, or the acronym of RUBS is what it's called, which is a formula that calculates the number of residents with the number of residents in the entire building against your square feet in your unit versus the square feet of the entire property. And so that combination gives a prorated amount to each resident of their bill. So you figure out what type you want, and then you would contact a utility billing company to help service the invoices to your residents.
Okay, so utilizing these techniques, the sub-meters and the RUBS, obviously it sounds like to me sub-meters get you a much more accurate gauge from a per resident basis than RUBS. But what are the overall benefits for both the property manager and then also for the resident? Because I think even though they may not see it this way, it's not always beneficial for them to have utilities included in their rent.
Well, the main benefit for the residents is really having that stabilized rent. If you're not having to worry about rent increases year over year because of the property's expenses continuing to go up, you're going to feel more at ease knowing that your rents are going to go up at a normal rate compared to the rest of the market. For the owner, again, we talked about before, stabilizing your cash flow and having kind of better control over your utility expenses. Conservation both benefits the resident and the property manager, and really kind of understand how their usage has an impact. The main one, though, is property value increase. If you start billing your residents for utilities, that expense that was a big expense on your profit and loss statement is now utility reimbursement. So your net operating income goes up, which in turn will increase the value of your property.
Which sounds positive and great, but I think I laugh because I think of the property manager and they might be fearful to jump right into it. What are some of the things that they might need to look out for, or what are maybe a better way to put it, or what are some of the things that might ease their minds knowing going into it as some things to watch out for?
The two major things to watch out for are revolving around regulations. Knowing what your regulations allow in your state, in your region, in your city, those change often, and making sure that you understand what your regulations are, or working with a partner who can help guide you in that sense. Also, resident notifications. A lot of people want to start a utility billing program, but you can't just start a program and make another charge item on your resident's ledger without having some kind of notification in advance. So you either have to wait for their leases to expire and do it upon lease renewal, or you have to do it upon new move-in and make sure you have the proper lease language within your leases. It's very, very important to make sure that you have the right lease language, and probably working with a partner to make sure that that's done properly.
And so you mentioned partner, and I'm fairly certain PayLease could be one of those partners for some of our listeners. What's some of the new and exciting things happening over there at PayLease?
Well, we're definitely growing. I think the word is getting out about how amazing our platform is, and it's a unique business model. I think what makes us different than any of our other competitors is we don't hold on to anyone's money for billing. All of our utility money that's collected goes directly into our property managers' accounts and helps them grow and be successful. But because we're growing, like myself, there's a lot of people with vast industry experience that have also taken notice, and we've had quite a few industry experts join the team. So it's pretty exciting over here at PayLease.
Well, Tiffany, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And if you'd like more information on Tiffany, as well as things happening at PayLease, you can visit their website at www.paylease.com. And for all things building success, check out mrisoftware.com/building success. And until next time, we will see you later.